yet met. My name is Jessica Polonsky. I am the new program director for GTRA. I am certainly thrilled to be here with you. We had a great day of programming today. We have another day and a half of solid learning, networking, and fun lined up for you. So I'm looking forward to experiencing that with you as well. During my short tenure here, I have had the enjoyment of working with someone who I consider to be a very strong leader. He is the Executive Vice President and co-founder of GTRA. His name is Param Eftekhari. I know many of you know him. It is my pleasure of being able to introduce him to you this evening. He brings a rather extensive background in helping organizations develop and execute high-performance operational and strategic growth strategies. Param's growing resume of professional writing and speaking includes being a contributing author to the 2011's Defending the Cloud, Waging War in Cyberspace, publications and articles for multiple organizations, including GTRA and AOL Government, speaking and moderating on executive panels, and having his research quoted in national publications. So please do join me in giving him a warm welcome.
I sound pretty good on paper. Well, as Jess mentioned, my name is Param Eftekhari, and on behalf of our executive director and my co-founder, Kelly Yoakum, and our entire team, I really want to extend a heartfelt welcome to all of you. It never ceases to amaze me. This is always kind of the moment where, after a long production cycle and a long series of events on our end, that I realize what an amazing accomplishment this is, and I really have you to thank. You know, I always say this to most of you when we speak, that we're always humbled by the support that we have from such a senior group of executives. We really do bring together the best and brightest in our industry, and it's very humbling that you take time out of your schedules, and for you govies that you go through that ridiculous process of getting approved to actually join us here at our humble little meeting. So thank you very much. Before I get into my comments for the evening, which will not take very long, I just want to do a few thank yous on behalf of the organization. I want to thank our partners who really help us promote both the meetings that we do and other activities and some of the research that we conduct. I know that Wyatt from AOL Government is here. Mark from ISC Squared is here. So, thank you guys for your support. We really appreciate it. Also want to thank our industry partners. Obviously, the time and resources you give to our organization allows us to do what we do. But this is very important. I'm going to take a moment to talk about the way that industry is involved with us. There are many new faces here. And you've probably noticed that this is one of the first meetings you've been to where there's no trade show floor, there's no expo hall, there's not even a lot of branding. And that is because our goal as an organization is to facilitate one of the things that OMB is always asking us to do, and that is engage with government and industry in collaborative experiences. However, as we know, oftentimes those seem to happen in sales environments. And while there's nothing wrong with that, both sides of the fence have talked to Kelly and I over the years saying, we really need just opportunities to come down and talk in a safe, kind of sterile environment. And that's what we've really fine-tuned over the years. And a big thank you goes out to our industry partners because we're very strict on who we allow to come to these meetings. We do turn down companies. We turn down money, to be very blunt about it, because they don't understand our culture and they don't understand our model. And that's very, very important to us. And it really does say a lot to the industry folks who are here that they are willing to put not just their time, but their limited marketing dollars to be here with you to engage in these productive discussions. So the discussions that are going to be starting tomorrow and going into Tuesday are those collaboration roundtables, which many of you have actually selected your own discussions to be a part of. That's when you're going to have a chance to sit down in groups with your government and industry peers, talk about different topics, go through your challenges, identify solutions, and ultimately go back to your agencies and organizations with some great ideas and potentially some new solutions that you can implement. So industry guys, thank you very much. And lastly, the GTRA Council. Most of you know the council consists of around 120 of the more senior executives we work with, primarily C-level executives. This is really the foundation of our organization. They provide us with guidance, with research, and with a great understanding of what the needs are facing the community, which ultimately allows us to really stay on the cutting edge, which is our ultimate goal when it comes to the curriculum that we push out. And right now, we're really engaged in some exciting times as an organization. There's a couple of things I want to announce that we've been talking about for a while. First of all, as you've met already, Jessica Polonsky is a new addition to the team. Not only has she changed my life, because you see I'm not really running around like I used to anymore, but she's really, I think, improved the quality of these meetings to a level I could never have taken them to. She's a 13-year veteran in program producement. We actually got her from the American Marketing Association, where she oversaw the academic segment of that organization. Before that, Jessica, some of you may remember her. She actually used to work for GTRA back in the day. She left the organization, and we welcome her back with open arms, and we're happy to have her. So, Jessica, well done. Another exciting bit of news is that we have officially launched our Health Tech Council. We had our first meeting a couple months ago. Essentially, it's identical in mission and structure to GTRA, except that we do this for the healthcare community as a whole. And it's really fascinating for this group. I think you'll be interested to hear that they are where government was many years ago, where security is barely a blip on the radar. Kelly and I actually, as part of the healthcare organization, have launched a line of service where we do vulnerability assessments for hospitals, and we ran our own collaboration meetings to talk about the need for this, and we were absolutely blown away at the lack of involvement, let's say, on the part of CIOs and chief medical information officers in vulnerability assessments. Half of them just don't do it. The half that do think it just means to do a penetration testing once a year. A couple of them are doing it kind of, routinely. Barely any really talked about the people or the organization or the operational side of things. So industry folks, I will say, if you're not in this field, call your VP of sales right away and say, we need to open up a new segment and focus on healthcare, because it's a really, really booming market, and they frankly do need your help. And on a side note, one thing I learned, which was very scary, which take off your IT hats, put on your people hat for a minute. They have now demonstrated in some hacking conferences, obviously in closed, safe environments, that hackers are able to hack into pacemakers remotely, wirelessly, and basically give you a heart attack remotely. They can even put malware on your pacemaker that if the person with the pacemaker is 30 feet away from another pacemaker, it'll jump to that person. Same thing with insulin machines. So it's going really, the security threat is going away from just losing your personal information or your health history to literally being able to use for criminal purposes, to harm folks. I mean, really, it's becoming quite scary. So it's a really fascinating field, and I encourage you guys to take a look at it. And finally, GTRA is very excited to say that after many years, we officially are getting our GSA schedule on January 1st. We just got approval. We have our final call next week. Many of you government folks have asked us to do training for you, to manage your events. We're now able to do that. You all are familiar with our Hack That program that we had a couple years ago. That is now coming back in full force. So if you have any questions about that, it is an AIM schedule, and we're happy to engage you on that discussion as well. But why we're here today? Well, today we're here to talk about, I got a little excited there. We're here to talk about securing the IT ecosystem. And we talked a bit about this already today. And we know that, historically speaking, our environment is very, very complicated. I literally found this from a company's presentation describing their ecosystem. I have no idea how anyone put that together. I don't know how it even means anything. But this was and ironically, of course, the main point of the presentation was we need to simplify and consolidate. So this is what we're used to dealing. But a couple of years ago, we all start talking about efficiency and transformation and simplification, right? So now, already complicated ecosystems, well, they start getting a little cloudy. And one of the benefits of how things used to be was even in that chaotic environment, you at least owned everything. You owned the data center, you owned your servers, you owned the folks that were writing your applications and your systems, and most importantly, you were the ones controlling the security, strategy, technologies, what have you, that kept it all together. Well, now in today's world, you're not having to trust third-party vendors to do this for you. On top of that, now everyone wants to bring their own iPhones, iPads, laptops, and they don't want to use yours, I want to use mine, and I want to access your information. Well, that doesn't really make me feel good. What this means ultimately is that now you're managing even more vendor relationships. It's very complicated, very time and resource intensive. And at the end of the day, your information and networks and systems are now accessible to, can anyone tell me how many people have access to your information? And nobody can. And that is really the scary part here. So a very complicated situation is now even more complex. And I was trying to find a good way to summarize it, and I think the best way to say it is that Michaela would not be impressed, and your Commander-in-Chief, Obama, would not be impressed either. So we're in a situation here where, no one's impressed. So what do we do about this? Well, obviously we know that we have to manage your risk. Well, what does that mean? And what we're here to talk about over the next couple of days is that the notion of risk management has fundamentally changed. And what worked before is not going to work today. So what we need to do, what we'll be talking about over the next few days, is changing our priorities. What do we need to make a priority today? Well, your supply chain. You need to understand who's touching your devices, who's touching your hardware, who's doing the coding on these systems that you're now buying and trusting to do all your work. You need to look at your contracts and make that a priority. We talked about this in a roundtable earlier. Because now the contracts are going to really dictate the future of your systems and of your information and of your data. And I've heard this from many folks over the past, increasingly over the past year, especially for those of you who are in higher level meetings. Who's in these meetings more and more? It's a bunch of lawyers. I think that should tell you something. We need to talk about prioritizing continuous monitoring. We're now talking about securing the data, going down to the code level, right? Not just securing your architectures and your systems and your networks. Information. You have all these security logs. We'll do something with it. Make that a priority. I don't care if you call it big data, informatics, analytics, whatever. But you have in there the answer of what happens before every single incident. So you can now look for the precursor of every incident, not the incident itself. It's all there. You just need to make a priority to find it. And ultimately, we've heard many times already, and I know it'll come up again and again, it's the people. So we have new priorities for our new environment, but that begs the question, well then, what do we need to do to make sure that we as an organization, right, as a community, are focused on those priorities? Well, I think that comes down to culture. But what does that culture look like? And I want to echo Ron's sentiments, obviously. I don't want to oversimplify the problems, or the solutions, rather. But I think the culture that would support these types of changes would really have two key elements. The first being that a culture is based on trust with your vendors and your supply chains and your team and your collaborators and your partners. But I think more importantly, it's a culture that embraces change. And we've been doing the same things for decades, and we have to now change them. And obviously, that's going to be hard. It's going to take time. And we all know that's a problem. And many of you are probably saying, well, that's, I'm out of luck because my culture and my organization is not cool with change. And that's okay, because I think the problem is that we always talk about change exclusively from an organizational perspective. And I want to tonight talk about, why don't we look at change from a different way to make it a little more attainable? And why don't we look at changing ourselves, changing us as an individual? And I try to think of a good way to put this, because I really believe that each of one of us can have a huge impact on our organizations. You don't have to be a CIO to change the culture. In fact, if you ask any CIO or in my opinion, any good CIO, they will say they cannot change the culture on their own, because the culture is made up of the entire team, right? So each one of you, whether you're in charge of an entire agency or whether you're responsible for a team of one, you have a critical role to play in this process of change. And I wanted to come up with a sexy way to say it, and all I could think about was, one bad apple spoils the bunch, which is obviously the opposite of what I want to say. So I have a bit of kind of an analogy here that, bear with me, I think you'll like it. Oh, I missed that one. So think about food coloring. Not booze, get your minds out of there. Think about food coloring, right? One drop of food coloring. You put a drop of food coloring in a glass of water, you change a glass of water red. Put a couple drops of food coloring in a bowl, well, all of a sudden, your bowls change color. And in my wonderful city of Chicago, we put enough food coloring in the water where we turn the whole river green for the most awesome holiday out there, St. Patrick's Day. And I'm not even Irish, so imagine that. But if you look at it, each and every one of you is that drop of food coloring, right? And the cup may be the person sitting next to you, or the person on that team, the project you're working with. The bowl may be your office, maybe your department. The river may be your agency, maybe the whole government. Be as optimistic as you want. But I really want to emphasize that it really does take a bunch of individuals to make great change happen. And so while we're going through the next couple of days and talking about all the things we need to do and what our new priorities should be, and as your voice tells you, man, that is not what my organization looks like. Obviously, I can't do this. I want to just encourage you and challenge you to go back to this and think small and say, okay, I can't change my organization, but what can I do to change myself? And what impact can I have on my sphere of influence. Because if you look over the history of time, big change did not happen overnight. Look at civil rights. Look at women's suffrage, right? Look at women's rights. Do you think one day, back in the day, there was a caveman who said, you know what? I think it's probably not a good idea to beat my girlfriend over the head with a stick every time I want to, have some fun. Maybe I'll give her flowers instead. And that's probably how women's rights started. And it's funny, but, things happen with one person. And now, hundreds of thousands of years later, look where we are. So I really want to, emphasize this, and I hope you can keep this in mind as you're going through your days with us here. I'm looking forward to meeting each and every one of you over the next couple days. And thank you for your time, and enjoy your evening.